Alrighty, first thing that you need to do is on Canvas, go and check out our tech page. We have a link right here to this website called Photopea, which is a free online Photoshop alternative, okay? And then I've uploaded 3 pictures that we're going to end up using. So I have a Hulk picture, an Iron Man, and a Danny DeVito picture. So go ahead and click all 3 of those so that you download them. So, you click it, it'll download that file right down into your downloads folder. Okay. Once you've downloaded all 3, we are going to go to photopea.com. Now you might start mine. I mean, I've already been in it myself, so you might have a big message up here with an X in the top right. You can just click the X to close it, and you should get to this point. We are going to open from computer. Actually, let's do this. Let's start a new project. Let's say new project. Let's just get ourselves a brand new canvas to start with. So we can kind of ignore all these template files. Oh, I guess I clicked. I'll go ahead and hit new again. We can ignore all this stuff. Let's give it a name though. So let's call this, I don't know, Hulk picture. You can call it whatever you want. Something besides just untitled or whatever the default is. Go ahead and hit create after that. When you hit create, it opens up a white canvas that we're going to be working with here, and we are going to end up doing a little bit of editing to that Hulk picture. So we need to go to File and then Open and Place, meaning we're going to open a picture and place it right here in our canvas. So go down into your Downloads folder and find those images you just got. So go ahead and find Hulk. We're going to start with him. So when you do that, it brings in Hulk into our picture, okay? Now, by default, we should be able to move him around. We're using this selection tool, by the way, which is the move tool. So it's this first little arrow thing. That lets us move it around. You'll notice I want to make him a little bit smaller and tilt him, but I can't get those little boxes around. There's a thing up top if I'm on the move tool. Basically, all the tools have their own settings up here. So when I'm on this move tool, which you see if I hover over it, it says it's the V shortcut. You might get a little bit used to some of these shortcuts. But we want to turn on this one box up here that says transform controls. When you do that, you'll notice I now have the option to transform or scale in and out that picture. So you can even hover over the edge a little bit and tilt him. You can stretch him. Don't go crazy. Don't give him don't make him too wide or too tall, but something like that. Maybe tilt him a little bit and put him off to the side. Okay? With that part done, we need to bring in our next picture. So we want to go to File, Open and Place, and we need to go find that Danny DeVito picture. So we're going to bring him in. A lovely specimen. So we bring him in, and we're going to want to cut out his head, because the goal is that we're going to put his head on Hulk's body. Okay? So in order to do that, and first of all, let's notice something. Over on the right, we've got this layer tab. And because Danny DeVito's on the top layer, he's literally on top of the Hulk picture as well. I could, move the Hulk one on top of him, and now he's the top layer. So think of these as you're stacking different pieces of paper or something, And if I cut something out of this top layer, you should be able to see the stuff behind it. So with this Danny DeVito picture, we're going to use a tool to cut out his face. So over here on the left, and you might want to just kind of look through all these tools just to kind of see what's available to you. We're going to use this third one down. It's called the Lasso Tool. So notice if I hover over it, you've got a couple different versions of the tool. So there's a normal lasso, there's a polygonal lasso, which is more sharp corners and hard lines. There's also a magnetic lasso. Magnetic is going to stick and cling to the sides of the shape. So we're going to try to use this one. So over here, and again, make sure that you are on the Danny DeVito layer. If you're selected on some other layer, when you try to lasso the face, it's not going to actually be on the right layer, and it's not going to grab the right part. So using the magnetic lasso tool, I'm just going to click and start the process, and it will try to cling to the shape. So especially over here on his head, you'll notice that as you move your mouse around, even if I like bring it off, it tries to cling to the difference in color between like his head and the background. So I like to get in the habit of just like clicking every once in a while, just to like, set my selection box. Gets a little bit tricky down here. I don't need his whole head, just this part of the chin. If you don't click that first box that you started with to get the selection, you can also double click, and that will hopefully set the selection box. You'll know that it's selected when you kind of see these little dotted lines around the part on the screen. Okay, so it should look like this at this point. We have that head selected. We need to cut it. Normally, if I wanted to cut something on a computer, I could hit Control X. However, you'll notice when I'm doing that, it says that little error up top, Smart Object must be rasterized first. That's a fancy way of saying that this layer needs to kind of be simplified in order for us to actually edit or cut it. So if it ever gives you that error about rasterizing something, if you just go over to this layer, right click it, you see this option that says rasterize. So if I do that, now we should be good to go. Now I can hit Control X, and then that cuts him out. I need to paste it right back in. I've seen some people have issues where when you paste, and it just kind of did it for me too, it tried to I don't even know, it tried to open a different picture somehow. So if you ever have that issue, Control Z undoes it. So just undo it, cut it one more time, and paste it back in. Okay? So if you have any sort of weird issues with cutting and pasting, you can always undo it, cut it, and paste it right back in. All right, notice. When I pasted it back in, it looks like I'm back to where I started. However, over here, you can see that when I pasted it, it pasted it in as a new layer. So this is its own separate thing now, okay? I don't need this background layer anymore. So if you click on the one that was called Danny DeVito, I can just hit my delete key on my keyboard and it gets rid of it. I should now just be left with my head layer and my Hulk that was behind it from before. So go ahead and select your move tool, which again is V if you want to use your hotkey, and you can move the head around. We should still have that transform controls button clicked, which means we can stretch the head down a little bit. We can angle it. I want you to try to get it to the right size and angle so that if it was over the Hulk, it looks somewhat normal, as much as this is going to be normal. So something like this, maybe a little smaller. It doesn't really matter. Something along those lines. Okay. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. If I hit Z for zoom, I can click in and zoom a little bit. If you get a little too far up here, sometimes I just kind of reset it by hitting fit the area. That kind of resets it back to normal. So a good 2 clicks looks good to me of zoom. All right. So as you can see, we've got the head kind of in place, and if you're not happy, you can still tweak it. But what we need to do is change the color. We want it to kind of match. So with the layer that I want selected, in this case the head, I'm going to go up to the image tab. You've got options in here under adjustments. You've got a whole lot of things you can do to this layer and kind of make it match the right color. So if I'm looking for color, I'm probably going to pick the one that says color balance. So I'm going to click that. Now, in the color balance window, you've got red, green, and blue sliders for the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. So dark colors, medium colors, and bright colors. So if I start with the shadows, and I just pull that green up a little bit, you can see his face kind of starts to have a lot more green in it. If I take out the red, it gets to that kind of that cold blue color. I almost probably even want to have a little bit of red and less blue, and maybe a little bit more green. Now notice I'm just affecting the shadows right now. I'm probably going to need to go to the midtones and play with the green in there. Probably the highlights as well. Be a little careful with the highlights because that can make it a little bit like neon green. But again, play with the greens, maybe even play with the reds a tiny bit to kind of I don't know, soften the image up a little bit so it's not quite so cold. And I don't know, play with blues if you need to. Get yourself to a decent spot where it looks somewhat normal for the skin color to match, but if it doesn't, that's okay. It should look something like that, okay? So let's see. We've got our Danny DeVito. His skin color is the same. And I think that's a good place to start this first tutorial. The next one is we're going to talk about bringing in the Iron Man picture and putting the second part in there, okay? If you want to get a little bit more complicated, what we could do, I'll just show you this real quick. It's not necessary, but it's kind of a nice little touch. Is let's say I wanted to like change his eye colors back to white. I'm going to use the normal lasso tool and making sure I'm on his layer. I'm just going to like lasso out his eye part right there. And with that part selected, I can go back under the adjustments and then I might try black and white. Black and white will literally remove any color that we have. And I don't know, you can play with these sliders. If it's black and white, we're not really affecting too much at this point, but you can see like the green from before, you can kind of remove or brighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to use the lasso tool again, grab his other eye, and you can spend more time in the effects if you want. I'm just using the most simple and quick version, which might not even look that great, but once we zoom out by hitting Z and fitting the area, you can't really tell. So that's just a way that you can individually select certain parts of the screen and, you know, affect only certain colors of the certain parts, okay? So whenever you're kind of done for a little while, get in the habit of hitting File, Save as a PSD. PSD means Photoshop document. So when I do that, it'll save the file down there. However, you can't actually open that file because that's trying to open in Photoshop. We're not using Photoshop, we're using the online Photopea. It's like a knockoff version technically. So if you ever, let's say I close this out and I want to get back in, if I just go to Open, and then now I should be able to go to my downloads, here's my Hulk picture, you're going to load that PSD to get back into the file. Okay, so you'll need to load that for the next assignment that we're going to do with the Iron Man part of this. Okay, so make sure that this is saved before you are done, and that should be a good place to start for the first half. All right, so check the next tutorial for the next part. And again, feel free to pause and watch this a couple times if you missed a certain step.